Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Petra Coach's Thought Leadership Series. Petra Coach is a mind shift business that empowers leaders and their teams to scale their organizations through the facilitation and implementation of the Rockefeller habits. With a wide network of thought leaders and industry experts, these workshops serve as an opportunity for you guys to connect with them personally and to ask your most pressing business questions. So today we have Chris Ronzio with us. Chris is the founder and CEO of Trainual, host of the Organized Chaos podcast, and author of the Business Playbook. At the heart of Chris's work is the desire to help business leaders find more time to do what they love, and Trainual is doing just that for owners and teams worldwide. In this session, Chris is going to share how a well-defined process culture that software like Trainual exists to help create enhances efficiency, fosters collaboration, and empowers employees to perform at their best. We'll explore the practical knowledge needed to integrate, sustain, and improve a process-driven mindset within your organization and teams long-term. As a reminder, this is an interactive session and we want to hear from you. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you will see a chat button. We encourage you to use that throughout whenever you have a question for Chris and to keep your cameras on throughout the session. So I am going to go ahead and pass it off to Chris to get us started.
All right. Amazing. Thank you so much for the intro. And it's so great to see you all. So you should be seeing my screen at this time. I updated my presentation to feature the signature Petra mountains and orange
Oh,
colors.
you're so nice.
So totally customized, right? But I want to start off before we jump into the content here. You all joined because incorporating a process culture into your business was exciting, enticing in some way. And so I'd love to hear just in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, what does that mean to you? What are you hoping to get out of this? Because for the next 45 to 60 minutes, I can customize this however we want so that you get the most value. So put in the chat, what does a process culture mean to you? If your company, your organization had an incredible process culture, what does that look like? I'd love to hear from you. So go ahead and fill out that chat. All right, so as we get started here, I'll tell you what it means to me. Oh, thank you, Candy. So everyone is swimming in the same direction. Yes, consistency. Every client or team member gets the same is that 5 degree experience? Teams following the same process to achieve the same outcome. I love that. We desire to document, then update all the changes in one place that's easy for us to manage with 15 different P&Ls. We may not all agree, but we all align. Yes, all of this is perfect. So when I think of a process culture, it feels like a really well-run business, an operationally sound, tightly run business, a well-managed ship, right? We all want a really well-run business. That's why you're working with Petra. And so if you want this process culture to trickle down to all of your teams and all of your employees, how do you establish the solid foundations to make that happen? Well, in my mind, the phrase that I love to use is, how do I get my business out of my brain? How do I get all the things that I know that I do well and help everyone else see those things, align with those things, or do those things consistently? And so, like we mentioned, Trainual is a partner of Petra, but I want you to look at this little animation here and imagine if this was the case in your business. That's what we all want, right? We want to suck all the knowledge that's out of our heads or out of our key high performers' heads, and we want that to replicate across the company. And that's how we get our highest results, our best practices, and our best performance. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. All right, I already mentioned the mountains. I'm a big fan. This is something I have in common with Andy. This was last weekend. I was hiking out here where I live in Arizona in the Superstition Mountains, if anybody has been to Arizona. And I want you to imagine that for a second, you came out to visit me. You flew out to Arizona, went camping in the mountains, and just lost your phone, lost connection to everything. You're totally in the wilderness and you just have no connection to your company anymore. Or maybe you're not a fan of the heat in Arizona. this is a trip I did last year with my brother. We went down to Ushuaia, Patagonia, because we were running a marathon in Antarctica. So it doesn't get much more remote than Antarctica. And being down there with, like, 60 other people in the middle of nowhere with no connection, I was totally detached from my business. So let me give you just a little story here, a little side story. I'm on the boat. We're doing this safety briefing, and I've got my vest on. I texted my wife this picture. She was thrilled, obviously. My brother's got his vest on, and we're getting ready to sail out across the Drake Passage. And so, if you don't know anything about that part of the world, we're at the very, very southern tip of Argentina and Chile, getting ready to sail across that Drake Passage to Antarctica. And when you're at that very southern tip, there's not a lot of connection. Your cell towers are bouncing between countries. You don't have much connection. But I did get this text. Do you have cash at SVB? Just curious, given what's going on. So this is March 9th of last year. And for those of you that aren't in tech, you may have heard of Silicon Valley Bank. And that was the bank that we used as a technology, a software. So I get this text as we are coasting into the wilderness, basically, and Silicon Valley Bank is falling apart. And so what do? We pull out our laptop and we try to get some sense of signal tethered to our phone to say, can we get in touch with the board? Can we get in touch with anyone back at the company to figure out what's going on? And as we drifted off into the nothingness of the Drake Passage and we pulled up toward Antarctica a few days later, there was one thought that kept popping up in my head. And maybe you've had this thought too. For me, that one thought was, can my business run without me? Can my business survive without me? And regardless of what position you are in the company, you've probably had that feeling. You've gone on vacation, you've been disconnected, and you've thought, can this thing survive without me? Or maybe at some point you're thinking about taking a different move in your career and you wonder, am I going to leave this business in a good place? So that idea, can my business run without me, was super top of mind for me. I was also wondering, can my business run without money? Will IOUs be okay? But really, it was, can my business survive? Can it operate without me? Do we have the process culture to operate consistently, even when big things like this happen? So I want you to think about that. Think about those moments in your business where those big things happen. Can you operate consistently? Do you have the culture for that? So you're going to be in one of three buckets. I'm going to give you a few different buckets here. So number one, no, it would just crumble by the end of the year. If you plucked you out of the business, it would fall apart. Hopefully, working with Petra, none of you are in this bucket. Number two, it would slowly sink for the next 1 or 2 years. Like maybe it would just marginally get worse and worse and worse, and things would degrade and devolve, and the business wouldn't be on the trajectory it's on today. Or number three, where we all want to be, is you'd just be living your best life. You're in Antarctica, you're camping in Arizona with me. They just don't need you again. This is where we all want to get to, again, regardless of our role, because the way that you grow in the business is to be able to pass off responsibilities and to have a culture underneath you that supports those operations. Okay, really quick, I'm going to give you my background. So I had a video production company, started when I was 14. We did youth sporting events. Cheerleading was my favorite, as any 14-year-old boy would probably pick. So we sold these videos. I would edit them back in my basement at home or my college dorm room. We would ship thousands of DVDs and Blu-ray discs and VHS tapes all around the world. And by the time I grew and sold that business, we had over 300 camera operators doing events in all 50 states. So I grew up in this business. And for me, the consistency of how we did what we did, that culture was crucial to us being able to scale, to do 10 events on one day in all different states. And the way that we did it was by stitching together a lot of different tools and information, Dropbox folders and Word docs. We had a forum kind of system where a message board. We had testing for our new employees to get them trained up. We had a CRM that we would tag people that had different levels of training. So this was way before Trainual. And it worked. We stitched it all together. It worked. I sold the business. I started a little consulting firm, and I fell in love with helping other businesses document what they do and build that process culture, build that operations manual. We, since launching Trainual, have worked with over 25,000 companies, every country, and documented millions of policies and processes. And so that's the foundation that I'm bringing you this framework from today. Here's one of my favorite companies that we've worked with.
Office policies and training manuals exist because of me.
So, you're thinking about training some new employees.
And if you were a boss and you had to deal with employees like me, well, you probably get tired of having to repeat yourself over and over.
And you could do like everybody else and use a standard training manual, and people are going to still ask you the same questions over and over again.
Before Trainual, I made some bad calls on what's okay to do at office parties.
I never read the employee handbook.
So, use Trainual. You won't be sorry.
Your business probably needs it, thanks to employees like me.
So hopefully none of you have employees like Meredith from The Office. Obviously, I was just kidding. We didn't work with them, but they are really funny to work with. You can all identify with that though, right? Like when people aren't getting it and they don't operate the way that you want them to, they're not fitting in with your culture. There's something that's off. There's something wrong. So how do we fix that? All right. So we call it a business playbook. If any of you received my book, I know we sent out a bunch of these, the business playbook. Let me explain what that is, what that means. And so we break the business playbook for your company down into these 4 parts. First, every company has a profile. It has a DNA. It has a reason for being. So you all probably have a mission and vision and values. You all probably have your founding story, why you exist, the target customer that you pursue, your products, your prices, your services, all of the basics of what you do. This is the foundation, again, that every single person in your organization needs to understand and needs to be aligned on. And so think of this as like that orientation, getting people acclimated to your business. Next, you've got your people. So every business has a uniqueness to it because of the people that work there. They've got their own backgrounds and bios. You've got a division of, someone said 15 different P&Ls. So you've got different segments of the business. You've got departments. You've got locations. You've got your whole org chart. And then you've got your roles and responsibilities of who does what in the organization. Getting clear on that is part of getting up to speed and aligned in a business. Who do I go to for what? Who knows what? After that, you've got your policies. This is how you decide what's okay and not okay at your business and your organization. These are the things that we often have to let people go for, right? When they're a mismatch or they infringe on our policies, on our rules that we set up in the workplace. And then finally, you've got your processes, your standard operating procedures. And so I know today we're here to talk about a culture of process, but the reason that we paint it in this way is that the profile, the people, and the policies are the things that affect broadly everyone in the business. Processes are very granular. And so when you get down to that process level, it's how do I do this thing for my role to be successful? But you want that foundation of the profile, the people, the policies, because in the absence of documented process, you can directionally count on people to make the right decisions if you've got that strong foundation. And so this is the way that we're going to instill this culture of process, is by setting that strong foundation. That's how we'll talk about it today. And if you can get these 4 areas of your business documented, then I promise you too will be living your best life. All right. So what we're going to cover, a few important principles to get started, where to start if you don't have this work consistently done in your business. We'll talk about your company profile. We'll talk about who's who and who does what, your rules or your policies, and then doing things the same way every time, getting at that consistency that a lot of you mentioned in the chat here. Before we get started, any other questions? Just pepper them in the chat anytime. Any thoughts, any questions before we keep going? All right. I see 42 content faces. I love it. Okay. All right. First, what percentage of your business do you think should be documented? What percentage of your business do you think should be documented? 100%, Devon. 90%, Emily, Candy. What else? Percentage, 99%, 92%, 80%, 80%. It's like we sorted these top to bottom. All right, 95%. Thank you for participating. All right, good answers. We'll come back to that question. So the first principle here, do it, document it, delegate it for everything that happens in your company. Whether you've been around for 3 generations or you're just getting started, everything that you take on in the business, you have to learn to do it the first time. The first time you do it, it's experimental. You're innovating. You're pushing the boundaries. You're trying something new. And so you do that thing. But then if you do that thing consistently over and over and over again, you realize that you've started to develop this recipe, this best practice. And so after you're doing it consistently, then you document it and you document it clearly. You write down that recipe. And when you've got the recipe, you can hand it off to somebody else in the business. You can start to delegate. You can start to replicate. You can have 100 people doing that thing when you've got a clear recipe. A lot of people make a mistake with this. They'll delegate, they'll hire somebody and just ask them to take over an area of the business that they're abdicating responsibility for. They have no instructions, they have no best practices. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Other times, you've never developed a consistency, a way to do it, and you start writing the instructions. And then those instructions a week later are null and void because they weren't the best practice. You just took the time, wasted the time to write them down. If you follow this process, do it, document it, delegate it, then you're consistently building this engine where you find out how to do something, you write it down, you hand it off and empower somebody else to do it. Then they go back through the process and they develop their own best practices by them doing it and refining it. And so what I would say is this principle one, don't write the way in your business until there is a right way. Don't write the way until there's a right way. And so unless you've got your company 100% dialed in, perfect, everything you do is perfect, I would say 100% documented is not the goal. I typically say 50 to 80% is what we're shooting for. Because in your business, there is 50 to 80% that's really consistent, really sustainable. And then there's always going to be that element that you're testing, that you're experimenting. And it doesn't make sense to document everything. It's too much work. And so remove some burden from yourselves, aim for 50% to 80% documented. And that is a really sustainable business. 50 to 80%. All right, next little story I want to tell, or little lesson here. If I asked you, what would you do to build wealth over time, to build a portfolio, to build an asset over time? Would you buy or rent your house? Would you buy or rent? Put it in the chat here. Buy or rent? Buy, 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 buy. All right. Sometimes there's somebody that's like, well, I would buy it and then I'd rent that out. But buy is the correct answer, okay? You would buy it. We all know this, that when you buy something, you're building an asset. You're paying into the principal over time and you're building an asset. You have something to show for it. So think about the other big expense, not your office rent, but your labor, payroll. Every week, every couple of weeks, we're writing this massive check, probably some of us millions of dollars every payroll, multi-millions of dollars every payroll. What do you have to show for it? So I would challenge you to think that if you're not capturing your team's knowledge, if you're not building a process culture, you're renting their salaries. You're just renting their salaries. And then when they put in their notice, when they leave, when the door opens and closes, you have nothing to show for all of those dollars that you spent. And so through this spending, through these salaries, you're paying people to acquire best practices, to acquire knowledge about your customers, your clients, about how your business works. And if you're not capturing that in one place, you're renting their salaries. So think about that. All right, last story here. When I was consulting before Trainual, I would go into every business I worked with. I would interview an assortment of their employees in different roles, these confidential interviews. And I'll never forget this one interview that I did in a daycare. It was during nap time. The kids were sleeping, and I sat down at one of those tiny chairs, and I asked the teacher that had been there the longest. She had been there 12 years or something like that. I said, "What's kept you around for all this time?" And she said, "Oh, through the years, I've gotten so many different opportunities. There was a new kindergarten that opened down the street that was going to pay me double. So many of the parents want me to be a nanny and they'll pay me more." And I said, "That's amazing. Why did you stay here?" And she thought about it for a second and she said, "I just don't know if this place could survive if I left." And I felt so bad for her. Like she was trapped in this business. The knowledge, the burden of knowledge and experience that the company could only run while she was there is what kept her from taking on these better opportunities for herself. So think about that in your company. Maybe you've got people that want to move on, that could take a promotion at your company or could move to a different company and free up some space for a, new fresh workforce coming in to do that role. If you can't let go of the responsibilities you have today, you can't grow, you can't take on new responsibilities. And so this is something we have to institute with all of our teams that is so crucial to the culture. It's not that we're trying to document because we're trying to automate our entire company and it runs on no people and we can then fire you. We're not trying to do that. What we're trying to do is empower you to do the higher and better use things that you can spend your time on. And in order to do that, we need to understand how we can pass off some of these responsibilities to other people, to new people in the company. So there's this constant like matriculation of responsibilities, and it is a growth opportunity. That's part of building this culture. All right, so where do we start? Where do we start in a business? So I always think about the ROI of content, the return on investment of what we are documenting, of the processes or the policies that we're writing down. So in the left hand of my little chart here, you've got the stuff that impacts the entire company. That is going to give you the highest ROI because if you have 500 people go through the same content, you've saved yourself 500 times of explaining it. And then you go down to the biggest department, the biggest team, or the biggest role. Some of you may have a retail store with 80 employees on the floor, or you've got a field services company with 200 technicians. But all of our businesses have this sort of approach where there's the whole company, my biggest department, my biggest team, my biggest role. And so where to start is where you're going to get the most ROI. You want to explain it once because that stops you from having to repeat yourself or having to go through the same thing over and over. It's the way the book is arranged. Profile, people, policies affects the most people. Then we get to processes. All right, let's start with your company profile. I want to do a really simple volunteer experience here. And I'm going to ask for just one person that wants to be brave and unmute themselves and give me a little bit of information about your business. And so think about if you're that person. I'm going to tell a quick story and then I need that volunteer. I'd love to see you in the chat. All right. So when I went to school, to university, I went to Bentley University up in the Boston area. And before school started, I went in and they had a orientation where for 3 days I got to spend time on campus. I'd swipe my meal card. I would check out books from the library. I would learn where my classes were. I'd sleep in the dorms. I'd buy the t-shirts and the hats. And I walked out as a super fan, right? I lived and breathed the university after 3 days. How many of you have that incredible of an orientation process for your new hires? Because that's where it starts. That's where a culture of process and alignment begins, is getting people up to speed on your business. So a great orientation is going to have these elements to it. A simple welcome to the company. I'll go through that in a minute. Your mission, your vision, your values, the founding story of how this company came to be, a timeline of your key milestones, your menu of products and services. And then if I zoom all the way out, what's your business model? From how you get, market and get leads to close sales to, ship products or deliver services to billing people to retaining those customers and turning them into repeat customers. All of us have this start to finish model in our business. These elements are the building blocks for a simple orientation. So I mentioned the welcome to the company. This is the first touch point that I typically have with our new hires. And it's a really repeatable video that I've recorded. And it goes something like this. Hey, what's up? I'm Chris from Trainual. I'm the CEO and founder here. If you're watching this video, it means you went all the way through our hiring process and you are a part of the team. Welcome to the team. I'm so excited that you're here, and I can't wait to see you in the hallways at our office and give you a high five. Over the next few days, you're going to learn a ton about the company, and we're going to get to interact in person a few times. You're going to meet your manager if you haven't already. You're going to meet your team, and you're going to learn about why this business exists. And I hope you're excited. So if you need anything in the meantime, please just reach out to me. My email is chris@trainual.com, or hit me on Slack as soon as you get your account. See you soon. It's a 60-second video to welcome your new people in the most friendly and approachable way possible. Because if you want people to feel comfortable suggesting best practices, and you want people to share their ideas and innovate, you want them to feel like they belong, right? And so from the very first touch in the business, you should have a repeatable welcome that exists whether I'm in Antarctica or whether I'm sick or whether I am in the office, but I'm just on a meeting and they walk by my door and I missed them. You know, they get that same welcome so that they feel comfortable when they approach me. And so all of you can have something like that. And I want to get one volunteer to share their welcome to their business.
Felicia is our volunteer, so I'm going to ask her to unmute here.
Hello.
Hey, Felicia. All right, let's hear it. I just got hired and you have to welcome me to the company.
Okay, perfect. Hey, Chris, welcome to Rise Collective. I am so excited that you get to start your journey with us. Even if you've been in real estate for a while or you're brand new, we're all about helping you grow and launching out so you can grow your own business. During the next 6 weeks, you're going to meet with myself for 1 hour. You'll meet with our founder, Hannah, and also our broker, Jamie, who will be training you throughout this whole process. I'll see you at the morning meeting tomorrow, and so excited that you've joined on.
Amazing. So good. So good. Round of applause for Felicia, everyone. We're all on camera. I can see you if you're not applauding. Let's go.
Thank you. We're
Thank
actually building out our new agent training program, so this is like perfect for exactly what I'm working on right now.
Oh, I love it. Cool. Great job, Felicia. Thank you. All right. So what you all witnessed right there was documentation. Felicia on video did something that we can then record and replay and save her from having to explain it 100 times, right? That's documentation. And a lot of times we put this pressure on ourselves that our operations manual has to be this crazy 300-page, 3-ring binder. Documentation is any way you communicate. It's any way you feel comfortable communicating that you can then replay and make accessible to other people. And so as simple as a webcam video, like we just had right there, is documentation. And all of the tools that are on this screen here are free if you're just looking for a simple way to record your screen or record a video and send it to your people through your process. And so recording or videos or captures are a super powerful way to start documenting. Thanks again, Felicia. All right. Number 2, your people. How do you get clear alignment on the people element of your business? And so your people, like I mentioned, of course, is the whole directory, the contact info, the bios and backgrounds and teams and departments and locations. But I want to laser focus in on one thing, and that is roles and responsibilities. All right. Quick little side story here. Does anybody know who this recording artist is in the chat? Anybody know who this is? I'll give you a hint. Let's see. 3, 2, 1. This is how we do it. This is how we do it. All right, so Montel Jordan, This Is How We Do It. Huge 90s jam, right? But it still is played on the radio and every sports arena in America. Awesome song. So we used to play Montel's song at every single company meeting because This Is How We Do It is basically like Trainual's anthem, right? This is like your playbook. This is how we do it. We reached out to Montel and we produced a remix to his song with him called This Is How You Do It. It's like a small to mid-sized business anthem. It's so good. I'll give you a little preview.
Yeah. Montel, train you up.
All right. So you have to look it up on Spotify. I promise. We're the only SaaS company with a hit song on Spotify. So we're doing this song with Montel. We fly out to Brooklyn to shoot a music video with him. And he asks us as we're shooting this video, why don't you guys be in the video, be background dancers? You can have a cameo in this video. And so we say, of course we'll do that. Like, when am I going to have an opportunity to be in a music video? Let's do this. We jump on set with him. Uh, I look up to Montel and I say, what am I supposed to do? And he says, whatever you do, just don't do what I do. And he was basically saying, like, don't try to look cool because he's been doing this 30 years. He knows how to dance. I clearly don't try to look cool. But what he was really saying was like, I'm the front man. I'm the one that's performing here, and you guys are just background dancers. And so for you, for your company, for every single person in your company, I want you to think about this little analogy that there is something that they do that they're at the front of the stage, and everything else is background dancing, supporting them in their role, right? And this is for every single position in the company. And what it comes down to is just documented responsibilities, clearly knowing who is responsible for what, who has what role and what responsibility in the business. So I used to do this with a simple Google sheet. This is from years ago where I would go through and document my responsibilities in the business. And then I'd highlight what are the things that in the next quarter can come off my plate. And so, as leaders in the business, this is something you're probably thinking about. I can't do all of this stuff. How do I take things off my plate? For other people in the business, they might be thinking about what they can put on their plate, the new things that they want to tackle. So, again, like I said, check out the song on Spotify, but I'm going to give you a tool here on how to build a responsibility matrix, how to fill out a who does what in your business and take this across the company. All right, so simple brainstorm. Think about, what do I do each day, each week, each month, each quarter, and each year? If you put your pen to paper, you could probably come up with a dozen things, maybe 2 dozen things that you do just in this time-based approach. Next little trick here is your last 2 weeks of sent mail. You go through your sent mail inbox. That shows you what you've actually engaged with, the stuff you forwarded to other people, your outbound messages, and the things people are coming to you for that you respond to. So sent mail is a gold mine for responsibilities. And then a calendar review. What are the things that are on your schedule, the appointments you have, the meetings, the vendors, all of that shows more responsibilities. And finally, any other task apps that you use, project management, CRM, all of them have filters to show the completed tasks. It's a really easy way for you to very quickly, in 10 minutes or so, pull together all of the responsibilities that you do in the business. If we were in person and had more time, I'd take you through a workshop of actually doing this, and you would inevitably come up with 10 or 15 or 20 things in 60 seconds. Now, I want you to think about that. And imagine if you brought this exercise back to your whole company. You present it at all hands. You show it to your leaders, your department leaders, and you ask them, make sure everyone's crystal clear on their responsibilities. Go collect responsibilities. Within 24 hours, you can have thousands of responsibilities collected about your business. This is the precursor to documentation. This is the table of contents for documentation. You need to understand, what are all the things we do here? What are all the whats before we get into the hows? And so collecting that table of contents is a quick win. It's something I hope all of you take away from this call, because if you can assemble this table of contents, then you can start to filter through and say, where is the highest return on investment for a standard operating procedure for something that our alignment might be broken on or our consistency is broken on. But it needs to start with the list of what's. So go get that list. All right. Number 3 here, your policies. So what do you think when you hear policy? Let's use the chat again. First word that comes to mind, policy. Policy. Ooh, what comes to mind? Rules, says Emily. Handbook, David. Handbook. Right way of doing things. Inflexible. That's a good one. That's a good one. Boring, but security. Okay, so does boring come to mind or does security come to mind? Bible for the company. Your must do is your Bible. Okay. All right. I'm gonna zoom in on inflexible, on boring. I mean, none of us love policy, right? None of us love policy. It's kind of like red tape. And at Trainual, one of our values, one of our core values is no red tape. So how does a process and policy company exist with a value of no red tape? Well, you have policies for a reason, for a specific reason. Some of you are mentioning it here. Yeah, try that in California. It's kind of purple tape, right? It's like red. We joke about that. There's some red tape. It's not no red tape. It's some red tape because we do have employees in California. There are legal policies that you can't get around. There are things you're legally obligated to do, and I'm sure you've all got those in your handbook. That is, vacation time and paying out PTO and sick leave and FMLA and all these things that we're legally obligated to do. That's your baseline. You've got to do that stuff. Then you've got benefits. You've got a little more latitude here. I cluster benefits in under policies because they're choices. The benefits and perks that you offer in your business are choices in most cases that we get to make as the leaders in the business. And then you've got your cultural norms. These are like, do I have to wear pants on Zoom? Or whatever the question is, right? Can we date our coworkers? Can we use phones at work? What's our social media policy? What are our hours of operation? Can I work late at night if I want to? Can I come in on the weekends? These are all our cultural norms that we establish for how the business should run. And it fits into what some of you said was the Bible of your company or the employee handbook. So I usually think of this policy section as that handbook section of your playbook because they're the rules. They're the things that you need people to sign off on and to abide by, to understand. So one of the things I would ask you is what exists at your company that might be strange at someone else's company? These are your cultural norms and your benefits and your perks that are different about your culture. And communicating those up front to people is a great screening mechanism, and it's a great bait to attract the people that you want to attract. And so I put our core values on here. I also grabbed Petra's. We're both demonstrating our core values, but you don't just demonstrate them with words. You demonstrate them through your benefits and through your perks. And so as an example, one of our values is collect experiences. And so we give every employee a $500 experience budget to try new things each year. And they get reimbursed and they post in the company chat about their experience and how additive it was to their life. What was the new thing that they learned? And it continues to reinforce that this value is part of our culture. And again, all of these values are part of a operationally sound culture, a part of one where everyone gets along, carries their weight, is most productive. And so that's why this policy section is really important. So a little homework here. If you want to scan your screen, there's a list, a PDF. It's just a straight file download with a few dozen different perks and policies that people have given me when I've done this live in a live setting and I ask for cool ideas. And so if you're looking to make your company a little more unique and build your culture, grab that or get the slides after this and you can borrow some of those ideas. All right. Businesses are unique. Cliche snowflake picture. There we go. Your processes. Let's move on to process, which is a big reason why you're all here. Processes are about doing things the same way every time. And if you have a sound business, hopefully things are running consistently. So again, you take that table of contents, that huge list of all the what's, and we got to figure out what are we going to make process for? What are we going to define procedure for? So where to start? Think again, what impacts the most people? And here's some questions that I would prompt you with. I'll talk about each of these, but first, what is done most often in my company? What is done by the most people in my company? And what hat are you handing off next? What thing are you trying to pass off to someone else? These are high priority areas to document process. So the first one, done most often. You remember from my story, we were shipping thousands of videos a week. And so packaging and assembling these videos, the fulfillment process was a high priority for me because it was done so frequently that if someone messed it up, it would result in returned postage, in upset customers, in customer service tickets, in all these problems downstream. And so the things that we do all the time in our business are about getting them right, getting them correct. saving money, saving time. We want to, if something's being done all the time, we used to have races on who could assemble discs and cases and everything the fastest because we wanted to develop the standard. What's the best way we can do it here? We want it to be correct. So done most often in your company, again, is about getting it right. Done by the most people. So maybe some of you have retail stores or some of you have a point of sale interface where, everyone on the floor has to be able to process an order, process a refund, escalate an issue. These are things that are done across the whole base of employees. And so when things are done by a lot of different people, it's about consistency. From one person to the next, how do we deliver the same experience? I forget who said that very early on when I asked you what this was all about. The consistency of your experiences is what creates trust for your customers. If they can predictably have the same experience regardless of who serves them, then they're going to trust your business. They're going to develop a appreciation for your business. And so consistency is important when it spans people. And then the last one, handing off hats. So this is Damon John from Shark Tank and from Fubu. He is an investor with us and a partner with us. And the reason I have him on there is we did this ad about passing off the hats in your business. And he literally started Fubu by hand stitching hats. And so his first hat that he wore in the company was production, hand stitching, fashion. But then as the business grew, he's focused on marketing and promotion, and he's focused on channel sales, or he's focused on banking relationships. And those bigger hats produce more value for the business. And so he passed off the things like manufacturing or this or that. And so in your business, again, in your role, any role in the company, there are things that you're handing off. And that's about making other people capable, making sure that you're empowering them to do the thing and to take the baton and maintain the level of quality. And so those are the three areas that I'd prompt you for when you're thinking about which things should I prioritize for documentation. All right, let me give you my recipe here, my perfect SOP. If any of you have a copy of my book, this is also in the book, or grab a copy of the slides here. I'll talk you through really quick. Process name is just the thing. It's the responsibility. It's the what is this that's happening. The owner, every process needs an owner. This is who's responsible or accountable for it being done right in the business. And this is who you go to for questions, who keeps it updated. Next, you've got the date that it was updated. This is very important because if you want your processes to be up to date, you need some mechanism of sorting which things haven't I touched in 90 days, in 365 days. So whether you're using Google Sheets or Word Docs or a tool like ours, put a date updated field in there. Tools that you need to do the job. This could be hardware tools. It could be things like a template, a proposal template. That's a blank document that you need to get this job done. So any tool that's needed. The frequency. Is this something that's done once a week on Fridays? Is this something that's done every time the phone rings? Is this something that's done quarterly? And then the time estimate is how long should it take if I do this correctly? What is that best practice in terms of speed? Because a lot of us have probably hired someone and said, hey, can you work on this? And 2 weeks later, they come back and they're still working on it. And you're like, I thought that was like a day. I thought that was a day project because we didn't set the expectation. And then finally, your context. Why does this thing matter in the business? Who relies on this being done correctly? Where does it go after you do your part in the process? Who takes it next? All of those things are like the why, the metadata for a standard operating procedure. And then you get into the steps. And a lot of us would just start with the steps and end with the steps. We would say step 1, log into this thing, step 2, do this, step 3, do this. But if you answer all of those other questions, you're making sure that they get it right. That way they don't come back to you with 4 rounds of mistakes. So that's the experience I've found through working with a ton of companies. All right, you can grab this template if you want. Again, snap a picture of the screen or grab the slides after the fact. You could just print these out, hand them around the company, and operate on paper if you're a paper-run company. Feel free. All right, quick word on maintenance. So processes don't stay perfect forever. Like we talked about at the beginning, you're always innovating. You're always doing things differently. And so uh, my best practice here is every 90 days, I ask all of the leaders or people in the company to say, update the processes you own. It's a 90-day reminder that says, go through everything that you're the owner of and just give it a quick cursory glance, make sure it's still accurate. And there'll be one or two things that they're like, oh, we don't use that software anymore. Or, oh, this isn't how we do that anymore. They're little catches, but maintenance is really easy when you keep up with it. When you set those reminders and do it frequently. If you let it go for years, you may have to start over because so much of your business has changed. And so the simple tip here is just set that recurring reminder for maintenance in the business. And my last tip for you, don't do it alone. Don't document alone. This is first, use process owners, like I mentioned. This is a crowdsourced, democratized effort. Ask your new hires to help. If you've got nothing written down, your new hires are going to be kind of learning on the fly, right? They have to fend for themselves a little. And you can just give them a notebook and say, write down everything you're learning because I want to make it easier for the next person. And then another little trick is you can pair up across departments and you can say, hey, I know nothing about accounting and you know nothing about marketing. Let's interview each other about our jobs because that beginner mindset is really important. It asks all the questions that you may not think to ask if you're writing it down yourself. So a couple little tips there. All right. I'll round out my story. So 2010, 2011, the iPhone starts shooting in HD and my business is changing dramatically. I have my director of operations take over as president. We start to reinvent ourselves with a distribution website for live streaming video, and we sell the company. That was my blueprint. I needed to document everything left that I did in the business so that I could sell the company and pass it on to someone else. Your blueprint might be a lot different, but I would encourage you to have one. There's a reason that you would build this process culture. You've got some vision out there in front of you. You want to open up 5 locations. You want to serve 10 million humans. You've got a vision that is driving the reason why you would invest in this effort. And for all of you, when you're rolling this out to your teams, when you're saying we need to take process more seriously, you need to have a why. Because again, you don't want in the back of their minds them to think, well, they're just going to let me go if I tell them everything that I know. You've got to create the context and say, this is why it's important. This is how we're scaling. So have a blueprint. Every business needs a playbook. This is my firm belief. And if you document your profile, people, policies, and processes, your company will run the best it can. We have a special offer for all of you. So we put it in here. We can put it in the chat. It'll be in the summary after the fact, but you can get an extra $250 off just for being associated with Petra. Jared is our community rep here, our partner manager for this community. And so you can email jared.g@trainual.com if you want to set up a one-on-one demo, have them show it to your team, and take advantage of that offer. But with that, I'll open up the last bit here for just any questions. Thank you.
All right. Anyone have any questions in the chat? Chris, thank you so much. That was super jam-packed and informative. Going to give everyone a few minutes to put your questions in the chat as I start closing out. But I want to thank you guys for being with us here today. Let me turn my camera back on. Woo. Be on the lookout for a recap coming to your inbox in the next 24 hours, and that'll have information on contacting Chris, contacting Trainual, and the offer he just mentioned. There'll also be materials and recording from the session so that you can share this with your teams. If you enjoyed this thought leadership workshop, you can find out more information about our next one, Bridge the Gap with Dr. Kara Sprouse, on March 7th at petracoach.com/Petra events. Also, stay tuned for our next 60-minute habits workshop on creating themes that create results on April 11th. Chris, I want to thank you again for being with us today, and everyone have a great Thursday.